So welcome to the session today. We are recording so people can catch up on it. If you prefer not to be in the recording, do let us know and we can edit it afterwards. It'll only be made available to those who registered for the event and those who joined the network. We're really excited to launch the EDI Changemakers support network today. I've worked in this field for a couple of decades and feel really passionate having seen the joys and the highs of working in this area, but also some of the challenges that can come with wanting to create change and some of the resistance to that. So we felt that World Mental Health Day seemed like such a fitting day to look at how we take care of our colleagues in the workplace and the people who receive our services. As well as also make sure that we're all taking care of ourselves so that we can be the best change makers that we can be as well. So I have got some slides, which again, we'll send to you so that you have got those for reference as well. And throughout, we have got the chat function, so feel free to add any thoughts or questions. I hope we'll have a lively discussion there about some of the issues that we're going to be exploring today too. And just on a couple of practical things, the captions are on, so if anyone needs them, as I put in the chat, you can click on more on your menu. Usually it's at the bottom of your screen, depending on your device, and you can then click on captions and show captions. We will have a chance for anyone to join in the conversation, so you can unmute your mic and join in, or post a question or thought on the chat group as well, and I'll regularly pause to pick up any questions that people may have as well. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. We've still got a few more logging on. It's great to see everyone coming in. And you may want to say hello on the chat, so feel free to introduce yourself and let us know where you're coming from today. Welcome everyone. So I'm going to screen share and share some slides, but we'll also pause to come back so we can do some group discussions, take questions and do a few activities and breakout rooms together today as well. As I mentioned, we are recording, but if anyone would prefer not to be in that, which will only be shared with people who registered and members, just let me or Nick from MPI know and we'll edit accordingly. So welcome. I'm really excited today to launch our EDI Changemakers support network. I mentioned I've been working in this field for a couple of decades and really see the need to make sure that we share good practice. I've always found networking of other colleagues in this specialism really, really valuable to share good practice, to share the highs, but also to share some of the more challenging aspects that come with the job of trying to change the stubborn status quo. So good to have us all together today and top up our own self-care so that we can be at our best and feel refreshed, but also look at the ways that we can tackle some of the mental health challenges that especially affect everyone who lives with facing various oppressions that we'll explore today. So here's an overview of what we're going to be exploring over the next couple of hours. We'll do some introductions and then we'll explore the idea of this EDI Changemakers support network and some of the thoughts and vision we've had for it. But what we're really interested to know from you is what you would like from a network, so we can kind of really imagine it into existence together. And think what kind of topics would you want, what kind of format, what kind of activities would you want happening there. So we'll explore that together. We'll then have some time to have a breakout group so that you can get to know other colleagues a little bit more and have a chat in groups and share an EDI breakthrough, something that's to celebrate, which is a really good thing to do for our well-being, to remember all the light bulb moments that are happening, despite how difficult it can be sometimes to achieve the pace of progress sometimes we hope for, but also to share something that's challenging in the work we're doing at the moment. Because I always believe that when we put our minds together, there's probably someone in the group who's experienced the same challenge and may well have found a tip or a solution or a good practice that they can share to help. So it's very much the ethos of what we want to sort of facilitate here. We'll then focus on our theme of it being World Mental Health Day. Many of you may have other events today and activities going on to mark that and to support colleagues and other stakeholders. The focus today is particularly then really honing in on addressing the specific EDI relevant wellbeing vulnerabilities that are associated with the effects of systemic oppression, which we'll explore a little bit later. Also with microaggressions and the internalized oppression. And I often find this one doesn't get talked about quite so much on the EDI agenda and inclusive leadership program. So I'm keen to make sure that that's included in the discourse, and I'll share some resources on that shortly. Then, having explored looking at some of the statistics, some of the research that you can all take away and use on that, We'll then look at some resources in terms of positive change maker interventions. What can we do about the disproportionately higher rates of mental health struggles that are affecting people who are experiencing marginalisation and stigmatisation in society? We'll also then focus in on being someone who's challenging the status quo in the change-making roles that we're in. How do we look after our own self-care to make sure that we have healthy, sustainable change-making and don't fall victim to burnouts, which is a real risk. And certainly as someone has learned that the hard way over the years, so it'd be great to pull our tips in terms of, looking after ourselves so that we can manage the important work we're doing. A chance then to reflect and think about what action points and takeaways, and then we'll finally wrap up on the next steps for this network. We're not alone. We can look at taking this network forwards, and we have a date set in November, and it'd be great to get your thoughts on what you'd like that to look like and any hot topics that you might want to be included there too. That's a flavour of what's to come. So it'd be great to introduce ourselves to each other, though some of you may know each other. So if you haven't already, or you may want to add, I'd like to invite you, if you'd like to join on the Zoom chat, where you can add messages, and you may want to introduce you with your name, maybe the role you do. If you're happy to share which organisation or the sector that you're operating in, that'd be really good to get a sense of where we're all working, and maybe the location where you're joining us from today. And I think it always helps in network to make connections with people who are in similar sectors, or can learn from one another, or maybe if you're regionally close, you might want to link up and make valuable connections today as well. So I encourage you to do that on the chat, so I'll check in on that in a moment. Whilst you do that, I'll share a little bit about me. Lovely to see some people who know me already today, as well as connecting with new colleagues. So I'm Vanessa, being the joyful disruptor. So I like creating change, but doing it, shaking up the system with a smile, I like to think of it as. So creating change, but wanting to really engage people's hearts and minds in the journey. So I'm a facilitator of curious, compassionate and courageous conversations, and I hope we can have some of those today. And whenever I'm training, I give those free seeds to people often and say, this is what I want to create. So come and be curious, ask questions. There's no such thing as a silly question, but also the fact that compassion is important, because we're not just discussing theories from a textbook. These are real issues that affect real human lives. These are a lived experience, so with compassion, but also let's be courageous and not avoid the tricky conversations that need to be had, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I have over 20 years specialist EDI experience. I've worked both as an in-house specialist, but also as a consultant working across all different sectors. So I have a real appreciation of seeing what so many EDI changemakers are facing, and often lack of resources, sometimes lack of enough allies and champions. There can be real challenges there. But of course, the absolute joys when you have a breakthrough moment that come with this job that give you real satisfaction, doing work that often aligns with our values and feels like we're making a positive difference. My previous background was in HR, I'm a graduate of the CIPD, and then in my EDI work, I do consultancy, also mentoring, coaching for EDI specialists and people from underrepresented groups. Also things like SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, to look at how you're doing, or if your EDI strategy or policies need a bit of a refresh and you're looking for new ideas to reinvigorate your approach. Or maybe you need focus groups or learning training events and so on. So I do a real variety of work, and I've been grateful to also learn and draw upon insights from my own lived experience and my learned experience from people confiding in me. If anyone else has ever done freelance work as a consultant, you often become a confidant that people open up to about their experience in the organisation. And that really gives you a useful sense of where things are. I'm also passionate about liberation programs, including the Springboard Women's Development Programme that perhaps some of your organisations deliver. And I've got experience from grassroots community activism, and overall, so the energy is about nurturing oppression, busting self-belief in those who are facing oppression and marginalisation, and awakening the inner change maker, and encouraging inspiring ripple effects. So I'm going to come back from the screen share and to check in and have a look at the chat, and let's have a look. Look at some of these introductions. Great to have you all with us today. As you can see, we've got a real variety of people working across different sectors and organisations. We've got a few across, we've got Midlands, we've got the South, so quite geographically spread as well. Great to have you all with us today. And yeah, so scanning through, seeing such a variety of roles that everybody's doing, which is fantastic to draw upon collectively in our network today. So thank you all for being here. Fantastic. So what we're going to do is explore a little bit next about what we want from this network. So here's the vision that we have so far. So the vision we've had, the idea we've had, and we want your feedback on this, is creating a confidential safe space to open up. And that's something I've really valued throughout my career, having somewhere where I know I can open about some of the sticky issues, perhaps, or challenges that we're navigating in wanting to make good progress on EDI, but of course wanting that to be kept confidential. So we ask everyone to share experience and case studies here, but ask you all to sort of respect that confidentiality, that nothing about anyone's organisation or work that they shared is shared outside of the group. Of course, if you're sharing your award-winning, glowing case studies, people may well be happy for you to share that, but please do check in first, just in case. But I think a space where we can just be really authentic and real about the ups and downs of these roles is really valuable. We hope it will be a space where we can learn together, we can pool our experience, we can then learn more quickly because we don't have to make the same mistakes or fall into pitfalls that other people have been there and done it and got the t-shirt and can share their learnings. It'd be great to share and celebrate our breakthroughs and have a place where people who share the same passion can go, do you know what, we know how much work that would have taken, well done, and have a sense of shared pride in our collective progress. But also exchange challenges and solutions, a place to be appreciated, supported, and we hope reinvigorated to keep up our motivation and well-being and enhance both our individual and, of course, collective change-making power as a team. We also want to offer an online community, so we have a space waiting for people who'd like to join the network following today. We hope this will evolve. We have ideas for putting things like polls, Q&A, sharing collective experience and good practice resources in that community, and so that you can reach out to each other. So, for example, if someone's writing a new policy related to EDI and want to say, hey, has anyone else already done one of these and would be happy to share, it's a space where you can share those resources and not start from a blank sheet of paper. Someone else has probably done it before. We're looking to offer monthly virtual events of each one having a different topical issue, input either from myself or from a network of fantastic guest speakers. We've also with breakout discussions, networking time, and with a focus of encouraging leading to practical takeaway action points, which you can share with each other if you like. And if you'd like a little gentle accountability, you can check in with each other and say, hey, you had that idea, you felt inspired to act upon, how is it going? So that can often be helpful to keep our momentum beyond good intentions after we come to conferences and New Year's resolutions and such like. And what I'd like to foster is the culture of real group peer coaching. So we're sharing successes and challenges and gain from collective problem solving. So a really supportive space. We're also developing a newsletter, which will include a roundup of EDI hot topics. We like to suggest that highlights from your online community conversations will be there to remind people what's going on there. Sharing useful resources, upcoming events, but also a space where you can share your articles and contribute case studies as well. So we're all benefiting from pooling our collective experience. And we want to really have an ethos of co-creation so that the whole group has an input on what topics you would like to hear more about, what you would like some support on, but also tapping into this collective experience. We could have space to spotlight member projects during the online events. So if someone's had a bit of a breakthrough or tried a new approach, and we'd be happy to come to a future session and have a part of this meeting to share what they've done and answer any questions from colleagues. I've often found those real relatable peer case studies really valuable and practical. I can see a few nods in the group on the screen, which is great. So again, if there's anything you'd be happy to share, we'll be asking about that today. And we thought that possibly even a podcast might be a handy way of sharing something. I often find podcasts quite an easy way to catch up on all the overwhelming amount of information we try and keep up to date on out there, but you can do it while you're cooking a dinner or over lunch or taking your stroll in the park and so on. So it'd be really great to gauge your interest and what resources would be most valuable to you. And of course, sharing your top tips in the online community and the newsletter as well. In terms of well-being, I felt that's a really important part of having this space. So we'd like to encourage self-care by doing self-care activities each time, but also a sense of collective care ethos and looking out for each other. World changing can be tough work for sure, and it's important to look after ourselves so that we can do it well, and to recognise that everyone's going to be at different starting points in their career journey in EDI and the context in which you're operating and how far it's progressed. So it's important to create a supportive space and to protect us all from burnout, which I see studies so often when I meet clients around the UK in particular. And of course, we all like a bargain. So we also offer anyone who would like to join the network with a subscription model is what we're looking to explore, with discounts on other MPI learning services, online courses. And if you'd like to access EDI mentoring and feel like you need a bit more one-to-one or small group support, myself and other specialists in the MPI team could offer that as well. So that's a bit of a flavour of some of the thoughts and ideas we've had, but we'd really welcome your input on what you would like from a network. So if you're really thinking about what is your wish list, what would you really like to get out of a network, what kind of topics, what kind of ethos or values would you want it to have, what kind of activity would you want to be happening amongst this network to make it the network of your dreams? So we are imagining our network into existence together. And to do so, I've created a Slido. Has anyone used these before? So what you can do is join in a poll and add your ideas. So you can join by getting a device, like if you have your phone to hand and scanning the QR code, which will take you through to this question, and you can anonymously just all add your ideas on this ideas board about what you want from this network. If you don't use the QR scan code, you can also join at slido.com and put in the hashtag number there that's at the bottom left of the screen. So I invite you to join in and follow either the QR scan code there from your camera phone, or join at slido.com and enter the number code there provided. And you can all post anonymously, and we can just kind of pool all our ideas of what our wish list is. What would you like from this support network? What would it ideally be? Fantastic. I can see people are starting to hop onto the sharing board, which is great. So sharing lived examples is great to see. I think I always feel I learn from and always feel inspired by. I can see sharing ideas, best practice. Yeah, definitely shared hopes for me too there. I can see another post, space for professionals to grow together. That's definitely one of my hopes, that by sharing our experience, it supports our own learning and development. Sharing learning experience, safe space to discuss and conquer challenges. Love that. Absolutely. I can see another post sharing referrals, ideas, connection. Yeah, best practice. Fantastic. Bring in some theory and thought leadership in this space. Yeah, I think there's so much experience we can tap into here. Great to see. Loads of great stuff here. Interested to learn from others' EDI journey and how to help the team stay on a journey together. The space to feel less alone. It's a lonely role sometimes. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's important to acknowledge. Some may have the luxury of teams and a budget and like a workforce of diversity champions. Other sort of a sole lone role in the organisation. Others have been given the portfolio on top of HR or a board role or a department lead. Can see a few facial expressions. It looks like you're relating here. So yeah, I've been there. You know, I feel you, and it can be lonely, particularly when we're dealing with sometimes some reluctant or resistant reactions to some of the positive progress we want to create in the world. So I think this space can be really valuable for feeling less alone, feeling that you're part of a wider team. So suddenly, even if you're in a sole role, this could be your wider teammates here to tap into. So yeah, supportive space to explore ideas, recommendations for learning. I'm sure so many of us know about, good providers, resources, models that we've used, sharing amazing things we do within our business to really get people turned on to D&I. Absolutely. And I think there's something like that collective buzz that you can create when we can all share some of the things that are going well, as well as dealing with some of the challenging, stickier issues that we can help hopefully to unstick as well. So great, I'll keep that open. So feel free to keep adding to that, as I know sometimes we might want more time to reflect and keep adding more ideas. But thank you, there's some great suggestions there. That's really valuable. As well as the chance there to post online, just wanted to have a chance to come back to you and ask if anyone wants to share any other thoughts about what you'd like from the support network? So if anyone would like to unmute and join the conversation, feel free to come on in. So what we're going to do next is we're going to have a little bit of time to have a breakout group and meet some other colleagues. And we have 2 questions when you go into your breakout rooms on Zoom, which we'll invite you to in a moment. You'll be able to join. Give you a chance to connect with colleagues, get to know each other a bit better. So we have 2 tasks. First of all, we invite each person in your group to briefly share one EDI breakthrough. Now, this could be a big success, a major project that's moved forward, a statistic that you've moved, increased representation, award winning. But you know what? I also love the little wins. So it doesn't have to be the award winning, front page headline stuff. It could be you've just had a bit of a light bulb moment with a manager who usually doesn't get it, or it could be someone's come to let you know that they felt really empowered after joining your diverse staff network that you facilitate in your workplace. Or maybe it's great feedback from a customer or service user that things feel a lot more accessible these days. It could just be little moments. So whatever feels like a breakthrough for you, there's no right or wrong to this, it's just whatever has felt like something positive for you to share. So once everyone's had a chance to briefly go around the group and share one thing, introduce yourself and share your one breakthrough, the second task is then to go around the group again and give everyone a chance to briefly share one challenge that you're facing in your EDI work, something that you'd welcome getting tips and suggestions from your colleagues from here today. And invite you to receive the tips that you gain from your colleagues and not evaluate them at this point, but just take them away for consideration. Obviously, only you are going to know what's going to be right in your context and what would work in your specific culture and organisation. So I would say don't dismiss anything, don't judge it just yet. I would say just try and receive them with an open mind as if they are gifts. We'll simply thank each other for those gifts. Make a note of them, take them away and have a think about them later. There could be a nugget in there that might be useful to you. So just a reminder, when we do breakout groups, I'm hoping with a bunch of inclusion people, I won't have to stress these at all, but always good just to remind us to take turns and share what I call the invisible microphone that we pass around the group. And I always remind people on training courses to be mindful of power and privilege dynamics. So if you're usually a talker, or you're used to the world always listening to you, and it feels easy, it might be valuable to not go first and create space for someone else to come forward into that space. If you're usually hesitant to speak, or you don't always feel like the world hears your voice of people who look or live like you do, I encourage you to step forward and claim your space with joy today. I also encourage a space of listening, trying to avoid interruptions other than to clarify something or to keep on track with timings. To tune into the aim and task and be fully present with your colleagues so that everyone gets maximum value out of the time spent together. So if you are able to reduce other distractions and tear yourself away from the inbox for a while, that would be great. And to stay mindful of timing and create a supportive, inclusive space so that we can really open up, but also know that that confidentiality is protected. So it's one breakthrough, one challenge, receive tips from the group to help with your challenge, and then we'll all come back together afterwards. I will also copy that and put it on the chat and into your Zoom breakout room so that you've got that as a reminder as well. So what we're going to do next in the second hour is really dive deeper into our theme for this month, being World Mental Health Day, and particularly how mental health can affect anyone, but it isn't distributed equally. There are heightened risks, and we've probably all seen lots of statistics. We'll touch on some of those today. But if you experience being someone from a minoritized, marginalised, stigmatized, oppressed community, your rates of mental health well-being are much, much, much higher at risk and more vulnerable. So we're going to explore that next. And again, I'm going to come to some slides to explore that together. So before we kind of dive into the mental health, we really want to make that link with what we call the systemic oppression. How familiar are people? We talk in terms of systemic oppression. Is that a model or phrasing that you're familiar with and that people in your workplace are using? Just want to get kind of gauge, is it familiar? Getting some nods and some thumbs up. And again, it can sometimes depend on, like you were just saying, Janet, about sometimes when we live in this bubble, this world of EDI and social justice passion. Often we're kind of, keeping on top of these topics. But for a lot of people, if they haven't had training or awareness raising, they might not be as familiar with these models that could be so valuable. So this is taken from the lens of systemic oppression for a national equity project in America, which I thought was a really nice model that visually makes quite a complex concept quite simple in two circles that overlap like a Venn diagram. So I quite liked it for its way it conveys a complex model in a really simple, accessible way. So we've got all on the left-hand circle, there's sort of the individualized experiences of oppression. And this is where we can see, people have their unconscious biases or even conscious beliefs, prejudices, etc., that can be externalized, i.e. projected towards other people, or internalized beliefs about themselves and their own identity. And then the circle on the right is we've got the systemic, made up of a bit of overlap with some of those individual beliefs and behaviours, the interactions between people interpersonally, but also these wider, more complex concepts that sometimes people find quite difficult to get their head around. So we've got the institutionalized oppressions that are often in policies, practices, embedded in laws, inherited wisdom. We've always done it around here this way, those sort of thoughts that often are unintentional or unconscious, but just embedded into the system, the way things are done within institutions or organizations. And then wider structurally, how these effects interact, because the accumulative effect across all the institutions that are operating that way, and all of those sort of things combine as ingredients that cause what we call this systemic oppression. All of these different barriers and disproportionately higher risks and negative experiences and outcomes are this systemic oppression. And with that comes links to our mental well-being. So we think about the effects of living with systemic oppression, which is disadvantaging groups of people based on their identity, whilst advantaging members of the dominant group. And we've already heard the word privilege come up today, as it's so important to recognise. And as I mentioned, it's evident in laws, our institutions, the economic hierarchy, often in the mainstream media, social norms and expectations, and public policies, from the hostile environment policies to the 2-child cap on benefits, to the reduction of disability-related benefits, to policies on employment and working tax credits, and so on. All of these things add to whether someone's life is easier or harder. And when it's harder and comes with extra stresses, of course, mental health becomes vulnerable. And because of this systemic oppression experience, and that results in discrimination, inequalities, unmet needs, disproportionate negative outcomes in everything from education to employment prospects to home ownership chances to pension poverty to likelihood of being stopped and searched by a police officer. All of these different outcomes combine. And so we have got these documented higher rates of mental health difficulties across all marginalised groups, further heightened by intersectionality. So if you're multiply oppressed, actually you're not only facing systemic sexism and patriarchy, but you're also facing ableism, racism, homophobia, etc. These multiple layers, again, the intensity grows and the risk grows with it. And of course, things like the role of transgenerational trauma, where trauma is passed from one generation to the next, and the awareness that be it or growing up around parents, caregivers, and communities who have been through persecution of various kinds, or the awareness of what your ancestors have gone through. There's a lot of interesting studies of how this trauma is passed on from one generation to the next, and again, is another risk factor for mental health. But I also want to touch on the microaggressions, because of course it can be so much more subtle than the more obvious sort of policies and discriminatory laws that we are campaigning to change. So the microaggressions, is this something you talk about much in your workplaces? Microaggressions, I can see some nodding, yeah. I think it's such an important one because it's not always recognised. So this is the commonplace day-to-day, often casual remarks and behaviours that convey negative, unwelcoming, could be judgmental, hostile attitudes towards stigmatised or culturally marginalised groups. It's often subtle, it's often denied, it's often seen as harmless by those committing them, not realising the impact of their outlook. So it can be unintentional, unconscious, even well-meaning. Has anyone ever had a backhanded compliment? Oh, you're really good for woman, person from your community, refugee, what, you know, this sort of odd sort of that kind of compliments. It can also be well-meaning curiosity, but actually crosses the line into intrusive questions about your culture or your identity or life. A couple of references here. Chester Pierce, and you've come across a psychiatrist who originally coined this term microaggressions in the context of race in the 70s at Harvard University. His story is a really interesting one, broke a lot of first, real trailblazer. And then later it became broadened and used across kind of a wider diversity agenda beyond race to say actually microaggressions is recognised in research now as something that's experienced across all marginalised groups. So later broadened and popularised by Dr. Su, and their book in 2019, based on their academic research, found that 75% of Black Americans say they experience daily microaggressions. So this drip, drip, drip effect is important to recognise in terms of mental health and well-being. And actually, one person may react to one instance of microaggressions with the intensity of the cumulative effect of a lifetime of microaggressions endured. And then because that reaction in that one moment may feel very intense, it's common then to be labelled as being difficult, oversensitive, angry stereotypes, having a chip on your shoulder. So another thing that doesn't always get talked about so much are the effects of living with internalized oppression. Is this a term that's come across your radar before? Some nods, some less so. So it's something that's really useful because I think this is something that does sometimes get missed off leadership programs, inclusive leadership training. I think needs to be spoken about more. There's definitely something everyone can take away and share. So internalized oppression is when our own self-regard gets damaged by being exposed to the dominant system, including its media, which might tell us, depending who we are, messages about whether we are deemed to be successful, whether we're shown in the media in a positive or negative light, whether people who look or live as we do are represented in the media in positive news stories or more negative headlines, and whether we're deemed as presented as beautiful, successful, etc., or in more negative headlines. This tends to breed self-doubt. Imposter phenomenon can happen where we doubt ourselves and feel like a fraud and doubt our abilities. It can also be an experience of hypervisibility and self-consciousness. And this is where we are acutely aware of being the only person in the room, the department, the waiting area for an interview, the boardroom, etc., who lives and looks like you do. Perhaps people can relate to that, where you've been in an event or a room or a situation where you felt like a fish out of water, or you felt very different in some way to everybody else in the room. And so we know that that self-consciousness can lead to people doubting themselves in that moment, and even to the point where it can reduce their performance and capability. It impairs self-belief, it impairs working memory is reduced, executive functioning skills can even be affected when people are getting so anxious about being hypervisible and the idea that they might be being judged by people. We might then start even absorbing and believing, even subconsciously, negative stereotypes about our own identity. And we see this often, for example, sadly, in, for example, disabled people being marginalised and not represented and trying more to fit in and mask disability. So we see sort of masking and erasure of identity. We see this as something I'm sort of wanting to be playing a role as a godmother to my Black British goddaughter, who's now a teenager, and all these magazines in my day are now online Instagram filters. It's even worse than it was when I was a teenage girl. But the messages she's getting about beauty and the rate we're seeing of particularly Black women and South Asian women using bleaching products and skin lightening products that are being pressurized in terms of white and Western beauty ideals. We see this in terms of people who feel they've got to fit in. So maybe they suppress or censor. So if they have, for example, a really expressive personality that's part of their identity, maybe they start to suppress it to fit in with the general corporate style of other people they're working around. But they're sort of erasing part of themselves by doing it. Or if, for example, we're not talking or not sure if we can talk freely about our same-sex partner and really talk freely about what our weekend plans are, we censor ourselves, it makes us feel less. So we can develop a sense of self-loathing, self-censoring, a rejection of our own identity or community, a desire to be more like the dominant group. So you might hear, for example, someone from a working class background almost sort of deny their roots and say, well, I made it out of there and I'd never go back, or I'd never date within my own community, or I don't trust people in my own community. And it's really sad to hear this internalized oppression is what we're seeing there. So this can really reduce someone's well-being and self-confidence, understandably. And then further pressures can also come from stereotypes such as macho culture that might say, man up, or men don't cry or can't express emotions, which is so unhealthy and we're working hard to change. Or other expectations, for example, the archetype of the strong Black woman means, can I have a day off actually and have moments where actually I don't feel strong and I need to be vulnerable and supported and have my pain recognized? So there is a video resource there, which I won't show today, but if you want to explore it, or you may have come across it before, called the doll test. And it originates from the 60s of two Black researchers, Drs. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, who were exploring the extent of marginalisation that children had absorbed at a young age, around sort of 5 to 8 years old. And they give them two dolls, a black doll and a white doll, and they ask questions to see what the perceptions of the children are. And what they notice is, regardless of the child's identity, race, age, language spoken, changing the identity of the interviewer asking, all these variables don't seem to change much, but what did persistently come back was most children of all groups tended to associate the more negative qualities with the black doll and the more positive qualities with the white doll. And these are really young children, so obviously they're absorbing the world around them. And what we're seeing there again is internalized oppression. I want to mention a care note. If you do watch that video, it's not an easy watch. It is uncomfortable and it is painful, particularly if you or your close loved ones have experienced this kind of racialization and marginalization that comes with it. However, because it's so uncomfortable, I do share it quite often on training programs and invite people to reflect on what it means and how we can all be better allies to recognize that oppression doesn't only happen in these structural ways and externalized ways between different groups of people, it also affects how we see ourselves, and is why positive action programs are so important, and staff support networks and affinity support groups, so that people can disrupt this internalized oppression. And that's what gets me excited for improving well-being and confidence, for empowerment programs for marginalized groups. And I love Audre Lorde, and any chance to quote her I will take. So I think her words here are powerful. She says, the true focus of revolutionary change is never merely the oppressive situations that we seek to escape, but that piece of the oppressor which is planted deep within each of us. And I think she captures really well there exactly what internalized oppression is all about. And so in our work as EDI Changemakers, positive action programs, empowerment programs, liberation work, consciousness raising, role models, mentoring, all these sort of things are really important, not only because they're trying to strive to be a more representative workforce, but also it's so important for wellbeing to recognise that there is some work to be done often on disrupting the damage that has been done to people's self-belief. So I hope there's some tips, and I will share some more positive interventions to disrupt this further in a little while too. But as it is World Mental Health Day, and there'll be lots on social media, we've got the hashtag there. You might want to post today any reflections on something we're talking about today. Because while, as I said earlier, mental health can affect everyone, particular groups are at heightened risk because of oppression. So I won't go through all of these statistics, but you'll have these in the slides to refer to, so you can draw on these resources and use these statistics in the conversations you're having with colleagues and to engage allies and change makers. So just a few highlights. Over half of LGBT people say they've experienced depression in the last year in a Stonewall study. Particularly high rates, 41% of non-binary people saying that they had conducted self-harm. This is 20% of LGBT women, 12% of LGBT men, and so on. I'm mindful that some of these topics are challenging, so I won't go in depth into them, but they're important to be, of course, on our radar. We highlight here some statistics around maternal mental health and how women from racialised communities in the UK in particular face heightened risk and difficulties, and the disproportionately high rate of Black mothers being over 3 times more likely to die during childbirth. And there have been some more television documentaries, more high-profile articles examining this issue recently and calling for change. Muslim communities in particular are more likely than the population as a whole to be exposed to a range of social and economic risk factors which tend to be associated with poorer mental health. And that includes poverty, deprivation, inadequate housing, and so on. And also barriers to healthcare services not always being inclusive or faith sensitive to. Again, just a few, I won't go into detail, but just to pick out some of the themes of why we're focusing on this today. Race and class was a special issue with this journal of research, which highlighted the particular ways that the mental health of Black and racially minoritized people, migrants and refugees are affected by state policies, with much higher rates of facing mental health detentions and community treatment orders. Disabled people also report lower well-being levels and had greater increases in depression and anxiety during the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly feeling the additional aspects of isolation from the world. We often see reports of higher rates, wherever there's rates of physical illness or disability, often mental health dips come with it. There's often a stronger association there. In terms of some of the gender patterns, we see that men report lower levels of life satisfaction, are less likely to access talking therapies, and also that nearly 3/4 of adults who go missing are men. So you can see those links between these messages from our society about man up and boys don't cry, and this messaging that's so unhelpful in terms of making these services accessible for men to come forward. For women, rates of self-harm, particularly amongst young women, have tripled since the 90s. And also the most high-risk group for anxiety-related conditions. And if you haven't already read the Marmot report, originally done in 2010, and then the 10 years on review looks at the link between health and wealth, I definitely recommend looking at the Marmot report from the Institute of Health Equity. It strongly makes the connection between poverty and poor quality housing having an effect on people's mental health. And in fact, 21% of adults in England said that a housing issue had negatively impacted their mental health, and housing affordability, worry about making the rent and all the payments, was frequently stated as the reason. And with so many people struggling through the cost of living crisis at the moment, it seems really poignant and topical. In terms of the workplace, some interesting stats from Mental Health First Aid England, who looked at some stats that particularly looked at the post-pandemic heightening of wellbeing concerns, that the changing patterns in our work through and post-pandemic and the increased financial uncertainty faced are negatively impacting employee mental health. Almost half of UK workers say they are running on empty, with burnout, mental ill health and work-related stress now costing the economy £28 billion annually. Obviously, we would hope people would have primary concern for the human cost, but in terms of making the business case for investing in proactive, positive wellbeing initiatives, I hope some of these statistics are useful for you in making that business case to colleagues. You can see the statistics about people feeling that work is getting more intense, more demanding, and feeling exhausted at the end of most working days. 1 in 5 UK workers feeling unable to manage stress at work, and 1/3 of managers feeling out of their depth supporting their team with mental health concerns. So managers seem to be hungry for help with this, whether that's training, guidance and support in managing these delicate issues. And of course, for marginalised staff, those risk factors are higher still. So a few positive interventions to share. So first thing is disrupt. I'm the joyful disruptor, so it was going to be up here. So disrupt the systemic oppression. And whilst this can feel like a really overwhelming task to solve such big, complex social problems, we have this exciting opportunity to chip away. And what I would like to remind ourselves in groups like this, where we have a collective network, is all of us are chipping away. And if all of us are collectively chipping away, there is this collective impact we're having with ripple effects across all of our different sectors, organizations, stakeholders we're working with, changing mindsets and changing policies for the better. So collectively, although we might not be able to fix the whole world on our own, collectively we're having this impact. So the ways that we can disrupt systemic oppression include, access audit, equality impact assessments on your policies, practices, assessing your workplace culture, checking for habits where, if I say to people sometimes in organizations, why do you do it this way? They'll sometimes say, oh, I don't know, but we just always have. And no one's sort of reviewed it for so long. It just becomes this inherited way of doing things. And every new joiner just seems to fit in and go with it. So these things are really worth questioning and examining sometimes. I can see some nodding in the screen as I talk about that. So it's so important that we do review and refresh, and data analysis broken down by specific marginalised groups and identities, so we can really understand, are the rates of workplace satisfaction the same for disabled and non-disabled staff by comparison? Have we got equal access and feedback on satisfaction of outcomes or our services from different groups of service users, broken down by ethnicity, disability, LGBT identity, and so on. And so important as well as the data, though, is to listen to those who live it. This is one of my mantras that I try and put out there whenever I get the opportunity. Listen to those who live it. Sometimes we haven't got enough data, or the data sample's too small, or the data's not perfect. The number of times I've seen clients stressing out so much that their data isn't perfect or viable or big enough sampling. I say, yeah, but we know the qualitative data is listen to those who live it. Our own staff or service users or stakeholders are telling us their experience of our organisation. That is data. And if we wait for the data sample to be big enough, it's going to take a long time if we stay with inertia and we don't make change. So yeah, listen to those who live it is so valuable. So for example, thinking particularly in the mental health context, does your occupational health team, or if you have a contracted provider for an employee assistance programme, do they really understand, engage and deliver for everyone? Or are there some differing feedback from different groups of your workplace, across your staff group or across your service user population? This I often find when I delve into focus groups, when I go into organisations, often does get differing feedback. And I've often found that people who are racialised often say it doesn't meet my needs. The therapist or assistance programme person didn't understand the effects of structural racism and oppression on my life. So it's good to really check, have you got people who've really got this expertise to meet those needs and to disrupt these disproportionate mental health risks that we've explored. And it might be, if you can't find one provider that can do all that, it might be about saying maybe you need to diversify the procurement to tap into some specialist organisations. So maybe, do you have diverse mental health advocates trained in your workplace? Do you have a diverse pool of mental health first aiders and trained allies? Reverse mentors, I think some of you may have reverse mentoring schemes where frontline staff, particularly from underrepresented groups, mentor senior leaders. A great initiative. Also critical friends groups, and I think Andrew might have touched on this earlier about, you need external voices sometimes to give you the feedback and hear actually how are we doing, and to hear from diverse voices about how well your services work for people. And I love the idea of having microaggression mediators in every neighbourhood and every workplace. These could simply be marketed as mediators, but are your pool of mediators, if you use this in your organisation, are they trained to understand these kind of issues that could help reduce tensions and conflicts before they escalate between people? If we got in early, we might be able to de-escalate some of those conflicts and prevent people having to keep experiencing the drip effect of them. So a few examples of disrupt. Next, liberate. So some of the things that we can do to liberate ourselves and allies to other groups that we don't experience the same lived experience as, around positive action. I find most clients I talk to are not making full use of the Equality Act 2010's provision that allows you to offer specific targeted positive action to reduce disadvantages that are endured by marginalised groups. I often see people not being as fully creative and using the full potential of that legal provision. There is so much you could do, because now since 2010, it simply says initiatives to reduce disadvantage. So long as you've got evidence that there is disadvantage from feedback, qualitative or data, or your staff survey and so on, you can take positive action, specific training, specific workshop, mentoring, empowerment, consciousness raising to deliver more equal outcomes and reduce the disadvantages. So as a result of today, you've got a load of data that you can use, for example, to make the case for doing more targeted wellbeing initiatives to proactively support improved wellbeing for those groups you've identified who are at higher risk. That might be through diverse affinity groups, staff networks, diverse customer panels. It might be offering sponsored study or conference attendance to support career progression. It might be offering bursaries to support underrepresented groups of staff to access development and therapeutic solutions. It could be affirming liberation programs, mentoring. So all of this about Liberate is really, how do we disrupt the internalized oppression? Because you know what, even if we got the systemic stuff perfect, and we know that's not the world just yet, but even if we did get the systemic policies, practices, and institutional cultures solved, imagine one day the dream, we still wouldn't necessarily achieve diverse representation if we haven't undone the harm that has been internalized. So we also need to support that work to happen for people who have internalized and been affected by the well-being damage and confidence knocks of having been in that dominant system. So I very much think you need both areas. There needs to be action on the systemic, but also the personal liberation. Heal. So we're talking about mind health. There are lots of ways that you can improve people's access to healing opportunities, particularly those who are in high-risk groups. So can you improve access to specialist therapy and resources in your organisation? For example, there are organisations and websites like Black Minds Matter, the Asian Mental Health Project. There are various initiatives out there trying to make it more comfortable for men to speak up about mental health. Are you sourcing therapists who you've checked have got experience in LGBTQ and wider inequalities? Really just making sure we have got that diversity capability and cultural competence in these services. You can also promote books and podcasts and other resources that speak to the wellbeing effects of oppression and help people to explore and access that information about healing transgenerational trauma as just one example. Feeding on Heal, we also have Enable. So here we can share proactive mind care. So healing is about sort of, helping people heal the effects that have been endured. But then we want to have more proactive ways of looking after ourselves and other people. So here we can share wellbeing activities. And again, these could be useful for everyone in your workplace or the groups of people you support, but would be particularly helpful through perhaps your staff networks or diversity affinity groups. So journaling has been proved to have mindful effects of expression and getting things off your chest. So we don't let the microaggressions build up with that drip effect, harming us further. Yoga, breath work, mindfulness, nature or forest bathing is one of my favorites. We just absolutely immerse yourself in the wonder of nature around you. Creative expression, things like poetry are often very good ways for people to express what they need to say rather than suppress it. Meditation techniques and things like workshops on things like setting healthy boundaries, assertive communication, saying no, to help protect oneself from the demands, pressures, and expectations that the world puts on ourselves and others. And furthermore, to destigmatize and inspire. So get people talking about this and having courageous conversations about it. I think that's one of the simplest but most useful things we can do. And that doesn't always have to be through formal training or conferences. I think sometimes the little informal chats sometimes are better, or things like the Human Library. You can get creative here, open mic nights, poetry, role models, stories, all sorts of things that you could do to engage people in this conversation in ways that bring it all to life and make it really exciting and appealing to join in. And to highlight a resource, I don't know if anyone's tapped into Mind Apples before. I love this Mind Apple. So they have a charity and social enterprise arm, and they talk about how for our physical health, we often say, have an apple a day or do something healthy for your physical health. They're encouraging a conversation that helps people think about their mind apples. So what do you do every day, or could you do, that would be good for soul soothing and self-care moments? It is a stressful modern world we live in. So we need these moments where we can unplug and do something for our well-being. So Mind Apples, getting you 5 a day. We'll come back to the group again just to pick up any messages there or any questions at all. And also any other positive interventions. Great to hear if there's anything you're doing in your organisations or things you've heard about that you think are positive ways we can address these heightened risks to well-being for those facing oppression in the world. Feel free to type on the chat or comment on the microphone. Yeah, I can see there, again, that discussion about microaggressions and systemic racism. Great, Sam, for sharing that. It's good to hear that that's engaging people in the conversation. I think going back to something Janet said earlier, again, as EDI specialists, often we're sort of more aware that there are these differential rates of mental health impact. But if people don't follow the news or headlines or this sort of world, they may be a lot less aware that there is such a stark difference in rates of mental health struggles across the population. Okay, well, I'll keep checking to see if there's any questions come up on the chat, but let's go on and bring it now into thinking about well-being for ourselves and other people who are change makers, which is so important as well. We can only be effective change makers, of course, if we are filling our own cup, as they say as well. So thinking about our role as an EDI change maker, our work can have both positive and negative effects upon our well-being. So, for example, I know reflecting on my own experience, particularly when I was a lone in-house advisor in an organisation, there were moments where I had such lovely highs and fulfilling moments where someone said they felt empowered because they'd been on the women's development programme I'd organised, or the Black Staff Network were putting on a great event and people came up buzzing and with new ideas and feeling more confident and ready to go for promotion or progression, or maybe a breakthrough moment in a training room where someone goes, oh, I get it now, unconscious bias, I get it now. But there were also those moments of frustration, resistance to change, pushback. Sometimes, people really feeling quite defensive about the work of EDI trying to make progress. Again, I can see some nods and smiles and recognition there on the screen. And one of the things a comment that came from a recent piece of work I did with a client focus group was this quote on the screen here, and I thought it conveyed something I'd seen a lot of. And they said, the passion of straight white male colleagues on EDI is seen as heroic. But when marginalised voices speak up, we can be seen as trouble. We face that risk. And I thought that captures something really important to recognise, that those of us working in this field can experience this, but particularly often, many of us working in this field are often also from marginalised groups, and often it's the reason that we have such a passion for it as well, often or seeing it affect ourselves and our loved ones. But it's important to see the different level of jeopardy faced, depending on the person who's raising it. An EDI champion who's seen as fitting the mold, or has perhaps senior power in the hierarchy, or is seen as not experiencing discrimination himself, is seen as a role model, an inspiration, a great diversity champion. But in your organisations, do you think the feedback is received in the same way if it comes from a minoritised or marginalised group? Any thoughts? Anyone want to come on the microphone? Do we resonate with the quote there from this focus group?
I'm going to come in here, Vanessa. Just absolutely resonate with that. I feel torn because I'm often looking for people for whom that they can advocate on the behalf of minoritized people, because actually it's predictable, isn't it? So I'll use myself an example. It's really predictable that I'm going to stand up and talk about LGBT inclusion as a gay woman, or about, being a feminist, and actually I will always say, look, I'm looking for a strong man, white man here to talk about racism and to talk about feminism and LGBT inclusion. That's who I'm looking for, because actually they will be listened to in a way that maybe which is really awful. So I probably perpetuate this situation here. But yeah, absolutely. You can be seen to be problematic, can't you? You are a troublemaker in a way that someone else who delivers that message are going to be all really supportive. Yeah, so absolutely resonate with that. But I don't know the answer, and I probably have just talked myself into being part of the problem here rather than the solution.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think you were smiling and nodding as you were saying that, and sure relating as well to that experience, and really highlights why it's so important that allies step forward and do that part. And of course, in different areas, we can be both marginalised in one aspect of our life, but an ally in another area of diversity. And so it's so important that ally voices are used who do have that power, visibility, and often get heard and often get less defensive reactions. Sometimes people just don't want to hear it from someone who looks like they're from the very, background experience, and it makes them feel defensive or guilty or like they're a terrible racist, sexist person or whatever it is. And of course, that's not what we want. We're trying to engage people. So I thought that quote out of a focus group just really captures something I've seen so many times over the years in different sectors, that's something people are trying to navigate. So in terms of trying to help through, what I think the important thing is looking after the people who are doing that work, whether they're allies, but especially for those who live it, whether that's your staff networks or your service user groups and so on. So make sure that we recognise that when they do take on that role of, being a leader, being outspoken, challenging the organisation, being a critical friend that's so valuable to us to hear what we're not quite getting right and how we can change it, but how we protect them from the wellbeing impact that taking on that role can have when you're challenging the status quo. So both for ourselves and others, it's important to think about what we can do to top up our self-care. So I've got another quick Slido to find out what you do to give yourself a soul-soothing self-care moment. So you can share anonymously, whether it's your herbal tea, walking the dog, yoga, whatever your thing is, it gives you peace of mind. You can scan the QR code, or again, you can join at slido.com and enter the number at the bottom left there and add your thoughts. What do you do to take care of your mind health? Unplug. Add your thoughts. Thank you. Me, I love sitting in the garden. I have a very teeny garden. But I can see some birds coming in and out of the bushes and having a herbal tea. That always works for me. Or being in nature. What is it for you? What gives you that soul-soothing escape from everything? I can see some examples coming in. Yeah, walking the dog. That's what it's popular. Playing golf. Yeah, escaping. A dog again. Listening to a comedy podcast. Yes, laughter is so important, isn't it? We need that uplift. I'm a big fan of laughter and comedy for that. Walking green space, away from the noise and tech. Yes, don't we need an escape sometimes from all the notifications and pinging? Chat with friends in the pub. Not have, well, it depends on the friends and how much. But yeah, I think that's about talking, expressing, talking about your day, offloading, or just sharing life with friends is great. Walks, reading, writing. Some really lovely examples there. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. And it's helpful, I think, to know that we often intellectually know what we should be doing regularly to look after our mind health, but it's the doing that's sometimes tricky, isn't it? Really making space in our busy schedules to actually do it. So it's so important to do that. And so the next moment is a chance to think about what you actually will commit to doing for your self-care so that you can be the best, most effective change maker you can be, avoiding burnout, stress, and just getting really frustrated with annoying resistance in those moments we have to navigate, so we can be at our most cool, calm, collected, objective, effective self. So a moment for you to reflect, and you can share if you wish, but this can just be a private activity, to note down somewhere, what will you do for your mind care today? What one thing will you make time to do today to soothe your mind and have a bit of time out? What could you then also do weekly so that it becomes a habit and it becomes part of your self-care plan to be the most effective EDI changemaker you can be? And then monthly. So what will you do for your mind care today, weekly and monthly? I'll give you a moment to think to yourself. So thinking about a chance to reflect on some of the information, the statistics, the models we've shared today, and thinking about actions. It's always useful, I think, to have a moment to reflect and think, what will be your changemaker takeaway actions from today? Was there a particular model or anecdote or good practice shared that you think, oh, I definitely want to look into that, or I want to read up more about microaggressions or internalized oppression, or I'm going to watch the video that was shared, or, what is it for you? So again, just a moment to note down for yourself in whatever method works for you. However, I'm mindful that for many reflectors, you might want to go away and have more time to think about that too. And again, you have that space to do that as well. We will follow up with a feedback survey after the event. And again, there'll be more time to reflect and add further sort of feedback about what you will take away from today there as well. So I'll give you a moment. But again, I'm here if anyone's got any questions on the mic or the chat whilst you have a moment to think about what are the really practical things you want to make sure you take back to the workplace. It's so easy to go to events and conferences with good intentions, isn't it? And I really want to do this, and then the hamster wheel can take over. So encourage you to think about where could you put it and schedule it into your diary to create space to do the difference making you want to do. I'm really glad to see that there's interest in the human library. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. It has a special place in my heart. It's a wonderful experience. And if you look, there's a Human Library Facebook page if you use it at all, as well as the website. And they often list upcoming events that you can join online that are free and often very international in nature. So you can meet people around the world online and hear their story, which is lovely. Thank you. Hearing about potential experience, microaggression mediators, yes, I'm glad. And mind apples. Oh, protest songs, I'm delighted. I'm part of a rebel women's choir who sings protest songs. I'm glad that we can, glad that idea is catching on. It's a lot of fun. Changing the world one bad note at a time. I can hear thinking about more activity and new activity to drive engagement. Yeah, great. I'm really glad to be, again, microaggressions really resonating. Great, thank you, everybody. Did anyone want to come on the microphone at all and share any reflections or anything that particularly stood out for you today that you want to hold on to or explore further and take back to the workplace? Great. Well, I'll take any chance to refer to the work of James Baldwin. I don't know if others have come across this quote. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming, the work we do, I think, when you're passionate about social justice and EDI, wanting to make progress, and progress can feel so slow. It can feel like overwhelming social problems we're trying to sort out here. But I think, collectively, we're all chipping away at this and having a collective impact. And as James Baldwin says there in that quote, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And this is why I encourage people to face those statistics, to face the research that shows marginalised groups are experiencing high rates of mental health difficulties and vulnerabilities, to have the courageous conversations about this rather than tiptoe around them or avoid them or get awkward about them, but to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. Nothing can be changed until it is faced. So may we face up to it, may we be change makers, and may we all have more curious, compassionate and courageous conversations going forward. So in terms of next steps into the developing this network, we'll be sending you a post-event e-survey, and we'd really value your thoughts about today, what its potential could be to develop and be a valuable regular source of support for us all collectively. We'd also be interested to know more about some of the actions or things that you've been inspired to check out from today, whether it's resources or ideas or good practices that you can replicate. We'd also welcome your feedback on what you want from the network, what's your wish list of topics or how it might be most useful to you. The frequency and timing of virtual events, we're thinking monthly, and Tuesday mornings seem to be good so far, but we can sort of test out with people if there's better scheduling, let us know. And then value of memberships so that we can fund, make this cost effective and viable. What I've noticed from networks I've seen online over the years for EDI practitioners on LinkedIn and Facebook and so on, many of them become inactive because no one's really got time to really coordinate it and facilitate it and give it that dedicated attention to keep it lively and engaging and interactive. And this is why we thought this network, having that resource, is what's going to make it really effective and stay, keep momentum and stay active and useful. So it'd be really helpful to get a sense of, what value would it be if you'd have some subscription where you could have this access to the network. We had about 27 odd people, I think, registered for today. No, not everyone's made it, but they will all get the recording. And we hope to grow it from there with these monthly registered events, online and recordings, and online community newsletter and discounted services. But we'd also really love to spotlight members because we know all of you are doing all sorts of interesting initiatives and projects. So if anyone's got a case study that you would be happy to share and do a short presentation and Q&A, or it could be an informal chat that we do together as a double act, it would be great, because I think we learn so much when we hear from other colleagues share real practical experiences and projects that have made a difference where you are. And then in terms of coming soon, we've got a provisional date next month, Tuesday, the 28th of November. We're proposing the same time, but we'll hear the feedback and sort of check in with people and see if you suggest anything different overall, then we'll obviously adapt the plan accordingly. But date for your diary, 28th of November, we'd love to see you again and to hear what your wish list of what hot topic would you like next time. Maybe you'd like to go deeper on something you've heard about today, or maybe there's something else on your wish list. So let us know what would be most useful to you. We really want to co-create this community together with you. So thank you everyone for participating today, and those who couldn't join us but are catching up on the recording. We hope there's lots of value here for you, and hope that when we send out the information coming soon, we hope you've piqued your interest in being part of this network, but also shaping it and making it the most useful network it could possibly be to you.